My parents let my brother steal my work and ruin my scholarship interview. When I confronted them, they kicked me out. Years later, they came back, trying to use me to fix his failure, but I was ready this time. I'm 24 now, and it's been 6 years since I walked out of the bedroom I grew up in. Back then, I thought leaving was the hardest part. Turns out staying gone was the real test. My dad Richard runs the family like a board meeting. My mom Elaine lives for what the neighbors think. And my brother Oliver, 2 years older, is the golden boy they call Dr. Hale, even though he dropped out of med school after his first year. I've always been the quiet one. I make short films with a secondhand camera and a laptop that barely works. It's not a hobby to me, but Dad calls it that. If it doesn't come with a paycheck, it's a waste of time to him. Mom says I'm too sensitive. Oliver calls it playing pretend. For 6 months, I'd been preparing for a national film scholarship. Industry mentors funding real projects. I'd shot 2 short films and had an interview lined up for Thursday night. I'd arranged time off work and borrowed a jacket to look presentable. 3 days before the interview, Dad brought up a family obligation at dinner. The logistics company was sponsoring a banquet in Oliver's name. Apparently his research project, which was really just a summer internship, was being recognized. They'd booked tables, invited old colleagues, the works, the banquet. Same night as my interview. I told them I couldn't make it. Dad put his fork down and gave me that look like I'd just insulted him. Family comes first, he said. This scholarship could set up my career, I said back. Career? He laughed. You mean you're editing? Nolan, be serious. You'll have plenty of chances to talk about your little videos. Mom chimed in about how it would look bad if I skipped. Oliver just smirked and said, It's not like anyone will miss you there. I tried to argue, but there's no point when Dad decides something. If you don't agree, you're selfish. If you push back, you're ungrateful. So I showed up at that stupid banquet clapping along while Oliver gave a speech about future medical breakthroughs and listening to Dad brag about his 2 successful sons to people who didn't know the truth. I missed the interview. No reschedules, no second chances. I emailed them begging for another chance. They replied 3 days later. They'd already moved forward with other candidates. 6 months of work gone. A week later, I saw a post online. Oliver had submitted a short film to a regional contest. It won first place. The screenshots looked familiar, so I downloaded the video. It wasn't just familiar, it was mine. Same shots, same edits, even the original file names in the metadata. He'd taken my entire scholarship project, tweaked the opening credits, and put his name on it. The contest was small, maybe 40 submissions from a local business group. Nobody there knew about my scholarship application. Perfect place for him to steal it without getting caught. I confronted him in the kitchen. You stole my work. He barely looked up from his phone. If it was really yours, they'd know. Guess they thought it was mine. You had no right. Don't be dramatic, Nolan. It's just a video. You should be happy it won something. I turned to Mom and Dad expecting some kind of reaction. Dad folded his newspaper like I was interrupting something important. Oliver's been under a lot of pressure, he said. It's good for him to get a win. And you, Mom added, should learn to share. This family supports each other. Share. It was the hours I spent filming after midnight. The editing I did while my hands shook from too much caffeine. The stories I wanted to tell, and they were calling it sharing. I walked to my room and sat on the floor staring at my hard drive. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was how things had always been. By the time the sun came up, my mind was made up. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for them to do it again. I wasn't going to beg for them to see me. If they wanted Oliver to be the only son worth anything, fine. They could have him. I was done. I left that house the same night. I didn't slam doors or yell. I just packed a camera bag, a duffel with clothes, my hard drive, and the laptop. That was it. I left a short note on the kitchen counter. Don't wait up. I'm done. And walked out without looking back. The first 2 nights I crashed on a coworker's couch. It was cramped and awkward, but I didn't care. It was still better than sleeping under the same roof as people who treated me like I was nothing. On the 3rd day, I found a listing for a tiny apartment on the east side. It was a rundown 2-bedroom with peeling paint, a leaky faucet, and paper-thin walls, but the rent was low enough that I could afford it if I kept working. The other room was already taken by a guy named Luke Carter. Luke was 28, a couple of years older than Oliver. He used to run a small tech startup, but his uncle pushed him out when it started doing well. He told me that on the first night over takeout boxes and cheap pizza, family will screw you faster than strangers, he said. Not bitter, just stating it like a fact. We clicked right away. Luke was blunt sarcastic and had this calm way of talking about things that made them feel less overwhelming. Over time, he became more like the older brother I wished I'd had, the kind who gives real advice and doesn't treat you like a punchline. Life got busy fast. I picked up a morning job at a small coffee shop near the apartment, then did evening shifts delivering food. Most nights I came home past midnight, grabbed a quick shower, and worked on videos until I couldn't keep my eyes open. I started a film channel under a fake name and posted weekly. First video got 60 views, then 112, then 74. Luke gave me notes on pacing when we watched them together. A few weeks after I moved out, Aunt Linda called. She was the only one in the family who ever treated me like I was more than Oliver's shadow. "I heard you left," she said gently. "I'm proud of you, Nolan." It was 2 sentences, but it meant more than any fake "we're proud" text my parents ever sent. She asked if I needed anything. I told her no, not because I didn't, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I could figure it out on my own. The first months were rough. Rent ate my paycheck. I lived on instant noodles. My editing setup barely worked, but it was mine. It was quiet, and no one told me I was wasting my time. Then something changed. I made a short called Night Shift. It followed a janitor, a nurse, and a delivery driver working through the night in the same city, but never crossing paths. It was simple, raw, and honest. I posted it like usual and forgot about it. A week later, I got an email from the city's Arts Council. Someone on their panel had seen Night Shift and shared it internally. They wanted to award me a small arts grant and pair me with a mentor at a local film incubator. I stared at the screen for 5 minutes. The grant covered gear and rent, but the mentorship was the real prize. Access to professional editors and real feedback. When I told Luke, he grinned like he'd won the lottery. "This is it, man," he said. "This is how it starts." Aunt Linda cried when I called her. "I knew you'd make something of yourself," she said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. The grant was $8,000 over 6 months. Half went to rent and bills. The rest went to basic gear upgrades and festival fees. Not luxury money, just breathing room. For the first time, I felt like things might actually go somewhere. I wasn't just chasing something, I was catching it. A week after my short film started getting some attention, my mom texted me out of nowhere. "We're so proud of you. Come home soon." It felt fake, too smooth, too cheerful. I ignored it. 2 days later, Dad followed with, "It's time to come home and do something useful with your life." That one made me laugh. Useful to him always meant something that benefits Oliver. I didn't reply. I found out later how they even knew about any of it. Aunt Linda had shared one of my short films on Facebook. Just trying to be supportive, and Mom saw it. That's how she learned about the grant, the incubator mentorship, and everything else I was working toward. I guess she told Oliver because not long after, things started to go sideways. The first hit came in the form of an email. "We've received an anonymous complaint regarding your financial disclosures. Your grant will be paused pending review." It was from the Arts Council. Apparently, someone had reported me for lying on my application and misusing funds. They wouldn't say who, but I didn't have to guess. I sent them every invoice, receipt, and transaction I had, but the money was frozen until they finished reviewing. Then came the next blow. A video started circulating on social media, an edited clip that made it look like I'd admitted to stealing footage from another filmmaker. It was a sloppy cut-up of sentences from different behind-the-scenes videos I'd posted. The voice was mine, but the message wasn't. I figured no one would take it seriously. I was wrong. The comments were brutal, fraud, scammer, fake. Sponsors ghosted me. A gear company suddenly pulled their offer. Someone was tanking my reputation. A few days later, a friend from the incubator sent me a link to a film festival's submission list. I scrolled down and froze. There it was. My concept, my script, even the working title, submitted under Oliver's name. He'd taken another unfinished project from my shared cloud folder and submitted it before I could. I was furious. Luke tried to calm me down. "You're not going to win this by reacting." He said that's what he wants. "You need to think bigger." I knew he was right, but it still made me sick. Then everything escalated. I came home from a delivery shift one night and saw our apartment door slightly open. Inside was chaos. My editing setup was trashed, drawers were emptied, memory cards gone, camera lenses shattered. On my desk was a piece of paper with 4 words in thick black marker. "Stay in your lane." I called the police. They came, took photos, got my statement. No forced entry, no witnesses, no evidence of who did it. Without proof, one cop said, especially if it's family, this is tough to pursue. The next morning, Luke found a camera wedged near the window pointing into our living room. We'd been watched for weeks. The camera felt calculated, hidden, carefully covered in dust like it had been there a while. But the break-in felt different, angry, sloppy. My guess, Oliver planted the camera when he thought he was being smart. The break-in happened when he lost control. That changed everything. It wasn't jealousy anymore. This was deliberate, planned. Someone, and we both knew, who was trying to scare me into quitting. And for a while it almost worked. I stopped uploading. I'd sit at my desk and stare at my blank timeline without touching a thing. My drive to work on anything evaporated. A part of me even thought about deleting the channel, selling my gear, and finding a job that didn't make me a target. But every time I considered giving up, I thought about that note. Stay in your lane. That's what they wanted. For me to shrink back down and disappear so Oliver could keep pretending I didn't matter. One night, Luke walked into my room holding 2 coffees. "If you're going to quit, do it because you want to," he said. "Not because some spoiled idiot smashed your stuff." He was right. I wasn't going to hand them that win. The next morning, I opened a new project file and typed the title, Negative Space. This wasn't going to be another short film. It would be a full documentary, not just about me, but about people who'd had their work stolen, their names dragged, their reputations trashed. People who were told to stay in their lane. I started outlining interviews, scripting voiceovers, and piecing together the story. Every message, every screenshot, every suspicious upload. I started cataloging it all. I quit the delivery job and kept the coffee shop. Luke covered part of my rent for a few months. The documentary took 4 months. Filming on weekends, editing after shifts, all-nighters twice a week. My mentor let me use the incubator studio and software. Without that, my laptop would have died halfway through because I wasn't staying in the lane he built anymore. I was paving my own. The first thing Luke said when I told him about the documentary idea was, "If you're going to do this, do it smart. No angry rants, no half-baked evidence. You need receipts for everything." And that's exactly where we started. We spent the next few nights turning my mess into a plan. Luke helped me organize every piece of proof. I already had screenshots of the fake video posts, timestamps from when Oliver uploaded stolen footage, emails from the grant committee, and text messages from my parents that tried to guilt me into coming home. We created a timeline by line from the night I left my parents' house to the vandalism in my apartment. We upgraded security first. Luke installed a better lock and motion sensors. We also backed up all of my work on encrypted drives. One stayed hidden in the apartment, another went to Aunt Linda's place. She offered to keep it safe without asking too many questions. She was the only one who didn't need the full story to understand why I didn't trust anyone else. Luke traced the anonymous tip email to my hometown. We combed through metadata on the stolen files. They still had my original creation dates. The most surprising evidence came from Aunt Linda. She was looking through old family photos on the shared cloud everyone forgot about. She found a folder labeled End Projects, drafts of posts attacking me, the fake video files, even a document called Reputation Management Strategy. Oliver had used it as backup and never cleaned it out. Kept all the evidence because he never thought he'd get caught. I reached out to the mentor from the incubator who had offered guidance when I won the grant. I explained what was happening without giving too many details and asked for advice. She told me to talk to a lawyer who specialized in creative property and digital rights. She even recommended one. He worked on contingency for the IP theft, no upfront cost. For everything else, I paid $200 a month. Luke kicked in $800 for filing fees and told me to shut up when I tried to pay him back. The lawyer's advice was simple. Don't go public yet. The more you talk online, the more they can twist. Build your case quietly. Then when you move once and hard. He helped me start a formal process for a demand letter against Oliver for intellectual property theft and defamation. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, but it was the first legal step. I started filming Negative Space, not me crying, but how this happens to anyone building something. I filmed night shifts, interviewed other creators who'd been plagiarized, and captured my empty desk where the broken gear used to sit. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't even polished, but it was honest, and that was the point. I posted a 3-minute preview, break-in clips, screenshots, a voiceover about envy. A film blog picked it up. Views jumped from hundreds to tens of thousands. The attention brought new opportunities. A small documentary collective reached out to offer feedback. They even asked if I'd consider submitting Negative Space to a festival they partnered with. I wasn't ready yet, but I thanked them. The idea of my story reaching a real audience made me work harder. The documentary collective waived my submission fee through a festival partnership. Without that, I couldn't have afforded the $75 entry. Then came the email I wasn't expecting. A major independent film festival accepted Negative Space for its upcoming showcase. I stared at the message for a full minute before I believed it. My first feature-length project born from sabotage and anger was going to screen in front of real critics and industry people. The timing couldn't have been more perfect because just a few hours after that email arrived, I got another one from my mom. We're hosting a family dinner this weekend. Your father says we can help repair your reputation if you're willing to be reasonable. A separate message from Dad followed. We can fix this. Let's talk like adults. There was no apology. No mention of the vandalism, the theft, the lies. Just another attempt to make me feel like I needed them. I showed the text to Luke. He raised an eyebrow. They're scared, he said, and they're trying to pull you back in before you do something they can't control. I agreed to go, but not for reconciliation. I wanted information. I wanted their words recorded. Luke and I planned it out. I'd wear a small recorder in my pocket, and he'd sit in the car outside with a laptop marking timestamps as I texted him coded messages. The plan wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about being prepared. By the time dinner arrived, Negative Space was deep in production. I had hours of footage, more evidence than I'd ever imagined, and a legal path starting to form. For the first time since leaving home, I didn't feel powerless. And this dinner wasn't going to change that. They thought they were pulling me back under their control. What they didn't know was that I was finally ready to expose everything. And I wasn't going to do it with yelling or revenge posts. I was going to do it with proof. I showed up to the dinner at my parents' house on a cold Sunday evening. I hadn't been there since the night I left, and it felt strange standing on the same front porch I used to race up as a kid. Mom opened the door before I could even knock. "Nolan," she said, smiling like we were long-lost friends. She pulled me into a hug that lasted too long and felt fake from start to finish. Inside, everything looked exactly the same. My old photo from middle school still hung in the hallway, crooked and forgotten, like they'd never noticed it was tilted. Dinner was already set. A long table covered with too many dishes for 4 people. Dad sat at the head of the table with a glass of water, scrolling through his phone. Oliver leaned back in his chair, phone in hand, too, acting bored like he was doing me a favor by even being there. "Glad you could finally make time for family," Dad said without looking up. "Glad you invited me," I said, keeping my voice even. The small talk started right away. Questions about my little videos, comments about how I must be busy with all my online stuff. It was their way of downplaying everything without sounding obvious. I didn't bite. I answered each question calmly and kept my tone neutral. I knew every word mattered now, and I wanted them all on record. Halfway through the meal, Dad cleared his throat and set his phone down. "Let's talk about why we're really here," he said. "Your mother and I think it's time you started thinking about the future, about the family's future." I almost laughed. "And what exactly does that mean?" Mom leaned forward, folding her hands. "Oliver is starting a medical consulting practice," she said, as if the words were sacred. "It's an exciting opportunity, but he can't do it alone. We were thinking maybe you could partner with him. Partner how I asked, though I already knew. You have a platform," Dad said. "A growing one. You could handle marketing, media outreach, all that stuff you're good at. And in return, you'd be part of something bigger than your online projects." For years, they called my work a hobby. Now that Oliver needed help and I had an audience, suddenly it was a valuable skill. They didn't respect what I did. They just saw something they could use. Oliver smirked. "And let's be honest, Nolan, that whole plagiarism scandal and grant thing didn't do your reputation any favors. Partnering with me could help clean that up." I stared at him. "You mean the plagiarism scandal you caused?" He shrugged, like it was nothing. "Water under the bridge. People forget things, but they don't forget when you're connected to someone successful." I took a slow breath. "So let me get this straight. You want me to use my work and name to boost Oliver's business so I can fix a problem he created?" Mom jumped in quickly. "This is a chance to put the past behind us. We're family, Nolan. Families help each other." I kept my voice steady. "When I was struggling to pay rent, where was that help? When my work was stolen, where was the help?" Then Dad frowned. "You're being dramatic. We've always supported you. We gave you everything you needed. You gave Oliver everything I said, and you blamed me for being upset about it." The room went quiet for a moment. Mom tried to recover with a softer tone. "We're trying to build a bridge here. Don't ruin it with bitterness." I leaned back in my chair. Bitterness isn't the problem. Reality is. That's when Dad slid a folder across the table. "We had a draft agreement drawn up," he said. Just a basic family partnership document. Read it over. I opened it. The terms were vague and one-sided. It gave Oliver control over branding content and revenue decisions. My name was mentioned once under marketing support. It was a joke. I closed the folder. I'll look at it, I said flatly, slipping it into my jacket pocket. I wasn't signing anything, but I wanted the document. It could be useful later. As we wrapped up dinner, Oliver followed me to the hallway while I was putting on my coat. "You're not as important as you think you are," he said quietly. "You can't win without us." I met his eyes. "We'll see." He smiled that same smug smile he'd worn my entire life. "Good luck with your little film thing. Hope it works out." Outside, the air felt colder than when I arrived. Luke was parked down the block, waiting in the car with his laptop open. I slid into the passenger seat and handed him a small piece of paper with a timestamp on it. He nodded. Every significant part of that conversation was recorded and marked. "How'd it go?" he asked. "They want me to build Oliver's business for him," I said, "and they think I owe them for everything they've done." Luke snorted. "That's not surprising. But we got what we needed." Every word I said. That night, I uploaded the audio files to an encrypted folder and sent a backup to the lawyer. I didn't feel satisfied or victorious. If anything, I felt numb. But I knew one thing for sure. They weren't trying to make peace. They were trying to pull me back under their control before I got too far away from them. And they still didn't understand. That control was gone. They just didn't know it yet. The day of the film festival felt like the biggest day of my life. And the scariest negative space was finally finished. Luke and I arrived early. He helped me set up the small booth they gave us in the networking area. I printed a simple flyer. Negative space, a story about betrayal ownership and building something from nothing. Nothing fancy. I just wanted people to understand what it felt like to be stepped on and still keep building. The screening was in one of the mid-sized auditoriums, and to my surprise, it was almost full. A few students, some local filmmakers, a handful of critics, even a couple of producers I recognized from YouTube projects I'd followed. I sat near the back with Luke. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The lights dimmed and the opening scene played a shot of my broken desk memory card scattered on the floor, that note taped to the wall. "Stay in your lane." Then came interviews. A musician whose song was stolen and re-released under a label's name. A photographer whose work was reposted thousands of times without credit. A designer whose brother claimed his portfolio as his own. And woven between their stories was mine. Not exaggerated, not dramatized, just facts. Supported with emails, screenshots, timestamps, and video evidence. When the credits rolled, there was silence. Then applause. Real applause. Not polite clapping, but the kind that grows louder because people mean it. A couple of folks stood up. Someone yelled, "That was incredible." I just sat there frozen, trying to process it. Afterward, people came up to talk. A small indie studio asked if I'd consider expanding Negative Space into a series. A journalist from an online film magazine asked if they could interview me. Even a documentary festival coordinator handed me a card and said, "We'd love to feature this next year." It was overwhelming in the best way. Then, as Luke and I were packing up, I saw them. My parents, Oliver, standing by the exit watching the crowd around me. My stomach turned. Of course they showed up. Of course they couldn't just stay away. Mom was the first to speak. "We saw your film," she said. "It was intense." "Honest," I corrected. Dad crossed his arms. "You made us look like monsters. I didn't make you look like anything. I showed what happened." Oliver stepped forward. "You could have handled this privately." I laughed once. "You made fake videos about me, broke into my place, and stole my work. You don't get to lecture me about private." He flinched, but didn't back down. "You're not going to get away with this." "Get away with what?" "Telling the truth." That's when Dad tried a different tactic. "You've embarrassed this family. Do you have any idea how this makes us look?" "Yeah," I said, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. "That's the point." I walked away before they could say anything else. I didn't owe them a debate. The article about the film dropped 2 days later. It went viral on social media. The brutally honest documentary everyone should watch. It wasn't trending numbers, but it was everywhere in the creative community. Not mainstream viral. The average person had no idea who I was. But in indie film circles and creative spaces where Oliver was trying to build a career, his name was toast. My parents didn't get it. They thought they still had leverage because the documentary hadn't reached their social circle. They didn't realize the game had already changed. The message hit people hard. I got emails from strangers thanking me for saying what they couldn't. A few even shared their own stories of family members or companies stealing their work. I didn't hear from Oliver for months. Aunt Linda said he tried claiming I edited things out of context, but other people he'd screwed over started coming forward. His name became a joke in creative circles. She told me he threw a glass at a family dinner and screamed that I'd ruined his life. Dad had the stroke a few weeks after that. The attention brought more than just praise. The lawyer called me to say our case had gotten stronger. The stolen footage, the fake plagiarism claims, the vandalism, the messages, it was all now part of an official civil suit. Oliver was being served. And because my parents had defended and enabled him, they were being named too. The fallout was immediate. Oliver's film festival submission was disqualified after the organizers saw the evidence. The medical consulting practice he'd been planning suddenly lost investors. Even a clinic he'd been trying to partner with backed out. Word travels fast when you're caught lying. Then came the message I never expected. Aunt Linda texted me. Your mom called. They're panicking. They want to talk before the lawsuit goes any further. I ignored it. A few hours later, Dad called, then Mom, then Oliver. I let every call go to voicemail. If they wanted to talk, they could do it through lawyers now. One night, about a week after the festival, I was working on a new project when Luke walked into the room with a grin. You're not going to believe this, he said, tossing his phone on the desk. It was a news article. Viral documentary inspires new funding for Creative Rights Initiative. A nonprofit had launched a grant to help small creators fight legal battles over stolen work, and they credited Negative Space as the inspiration. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there staring at the screen, realizing that something I made in a tiny apartment with borrowed gear was now sparking real change. Of course, my parents tried one last trick. A long, carefully written email showed up a few days later. We're sorry for how things turned out. We never meant to hurt you. Can we meet and talk about this? I read it once and deleted it, because the truth was, I didn't need them to understand anymore. I didn't need them to see my side or feel guilty. The damage was done, and now they had to live with the consequences, just like I had to live with theirs. The night before the lawsuit papers were officially filed, Luke and I stood on the balcony of our apartment. The city buzzed below us. And for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. This is just the start, he said. Yeah, I replied, watching the lights in the distance. But this time, I'm writing the story. The lawsuit was moving forward slow but steady. Oliver's lawyer tried to settle twice. Both times with insulting offers that basically said, let's pretend none of this happened. My lawyer rejected both. We weren't after a payout. We wanted accountability. The civil suit for defamation, theft of intellectual property and property damage was strong. The digital forensics, the emails, the break-in evidence, the fake videos, it was airtight. Their defense strategy was basically, he's exaggerating. And that wasn't going to hold up. Then one rainy night in late November, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, Oliver was standing there soaking wet, looking nothing like the arrogant version of himself I'd grown up with. He'd lost weight, his hands shook. This wasn't the same guy. This was someone who'd finally realized he put himself at rock bottom. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his face looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. Can I come in? He asked quietly. I hesitated but stepped aside. He walked in, slowly scanning the place like he was searching for the version of me he used to know. I offered him a towel. He didn't take it. Dad's been sick, he said after a long pause. Stroke. Not too bad, but he's not the same. Mom's, she's not handling it well. I nodded. I heard. He rubbed his face. Everything's falling apart. Investors bailed. My name's trashed. Nobody wants to work with me. I can't even get interviews because every search result is about your documentary or the lawsuit. I leaned against the counter. That's what happens when you spend your whole life thinking you're untouchable. He flinched. I know I screwed up. Screwed up, I said, my voice low but steady. You didn't just screw up, Oliver. You tried to destroy me. You broke into my home. You spread lies. You stole my work. You watched me through a camera. And you never once thought you were wrong. He didn't argue. He just stood there, eyes red, staring at the floor. I thought I was supposed to be the successful one, he whispered. That's what they always told me. If you started doing better than me, then what was I? I didn't have an answer for that. Maybe he didn't either. After a long silence, he finally said, I'm sorry. Not because of the lawsuit or because my life's falling apart. I'm sorry because I treated you like you were less than me. You never were. For a second, I almost believed it. But part of me also knew this was probably too late. You don't undo years of damage with one apology. Still hearing it mattered not for him but for me. I appreciate you saying that, I said. But sorry doesn't erase what you did, and it doesn't mean I'll drop the lawsuit. He nodded. I know, I'm not asking you to. We stood there for a while, the rain hitting the windows, neither of us really knowing what to say. Before he left, he turned to me one last time. I'm leaving town, starting over somewhere else. I don't think anyone here will ever forget what I did. Maybe that's a good thing, I said. He left quietly, disappearing into the rain. I never saw him again after that night. Aunt Linda told me later that he moved to another state and was working under a different name. I didn't feel happy or angry, just done, like that part of my life was finally sealed shut. The lawsuit wrapped up a few months later. We won. The judge ruled in my favor on every count. Oliver and my parents had to pay damages, issue a public apology, and remove any remaining false content. More importantly, there was now a permanent legal record of what happened, something they couldn't rewrite or deny. Life after that felt lighter. I released another project, a short series exploring creative ownership in the digital age, and it gained even more traction than Negative Space. My following grew, and so did the opportunities. I was invited to speak on panels, collaborate with other filmmakers, and mentor younger creators who'd been through similar situations. Every time someone told me your story made me keep going, I remembered all the nights I almost gave up. 5 years after Negative Space first screened, I held a small gathering in my studio. Just a handful of close friends, Luke, Aunt Linda, and a few people I'd met along the way. We ordered takeout, drank coffee, and watched the film together. Near the end, Luke raised his glass and said to staying out of lanes. We all laughed, but I knew what he meant. I'd spent most of my life being told where I did and didn't belong, and now finally, I was living entirely on my own terms. Later that night, I stepped out onto the balcony and looked out over the city. It was quiet, just the faint hum of traffic below. I thought about the scared 18-year-old kid who left home with a backpack and $1,200. I thought about the smashed camera gear, the fake videos, the betrayal, and every single time someone told me I wasn't enough. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I remembered it. I felt grateful, because if they hadn't tried to break me, I never would have learned how strong I was. If they hadn't taken everything, I never would have built something that was truly mine. And standing there, I realized I didn't need revenge anymore. I'd already won. They had to live with what they'd done. I got to live with what I'd built, and that was more than enough.